Okay, so what we'll start off with, I do a separate intro once we've done the podcast, so that won't be right now. So what I'll do, Michael, is if we can dive straight in, and when did your running tale begin?
Yeah, I've always had an interest in running, but actually my first sport when I was at school was really, believe it or not, would be rugby. Um, so I played rugby from the age of 8 till 11 before then going to Stamford School in Lincolnshire. And athletics was really just something we did over the summer term to sort of fill in the gap when we weren't playing rugby. So a lot of my initial running was just because I was very, very fit from playing a lot of rugby and doing other sports. So, but I did go to a very good school. I actually went to the same school as Ewan Thomas, who's the world, European, Commonwealth, and British record holder for 400 metres. He was in the same year as me at school, so my interest in athletics sort of started really about the age of 11 upwards. But I certainly wasn't the best runner in the school at the time, but I enjoyed running, and I enjoyed being fit and healthy, and I competed for the school at 800 metres and 1500 metres, I think. Which
And
was only
what did you come in then? What did you come? First, second, third, fifth, last?
At school level, there's actually a bit of a mix. I did actually have quite a lot of competition. Not for my year, but actually there was a lad at my school who was 3 years younger than I am, who at the age of 15 would beat me being 18, which he went on to be a superb athlete and represented England at cross country. And but sort of I'd hold my own. Certainly my own year at school, I was probably the best 800 and 1500 metre runner. And then just against other schools really in the region, I'd win quite a lot of races, but certainly not every race. I think sort of 800 and 1500 metres were probably even a bit short for me. I preferred longer distances, but yeah, I'd win my fair share of races at that age.
So then, school. What happened after school? What was your sport? You said rugby. Well, did you carry that on?
Yes, I mean I represented the county rugby team, and I captained the county at rugby and played for the East Midlands. So I was trying to sort of really combine lots of different sports together. And when I got to university, I actually did a sports science degree at Birmingham University.
Okay.
That sort of continued my rugby in the first year, and then I realised that the only piece. So
Sorry, it just cut out. Then you said you realised, and what happened after that?
Yeah. So I realised after the first year of being at university that I certainly physically wasn't as big as some of the other players, and I was getting hurt quite a lot on the rugby pitch playing for the university side. So that was really when I sort of made a move a little bit more to athletics.
Okay.
I represented the university at cross country, but even then I couldn't get into the first team, and I was just about getting into sort of the back end of the second team for cross country. So the standard was very, very good. But at that stage, I certainly wasn't taking running particularly seriously. I trained maybe two or three times a week at the most. I didn't realise that, to be good, you have to train a lot harder than that.
So then what happened? When did it start getting serious for you?
Well, I didn't really do a lot of athletics, even though my first job was actually as a sort of physiologist and advising people on health and lifestyle. I didn't really do a lot of running in my 20s, and then a move from London to Northampton. I thought joining a new town and a new place would be a good opportunity to sort of join a sports club. And so I looked at running clubs in the area and actually joined Woodturning Running Club, or Woodturning Road Runners. And when I first joined them, I started running a bit of cross country and a few road runs. But again, sort of in my early 30s, I still wasn't training that hard. I was kind of running based on sort of natural talent, I guess, at that stage. And I do remember specifically speaking to somebody in Woodturn. I asked them what training they'd done the day before. I think I turned up for a Thursday night session, and I just asked, well, what sort of training do you do apart from this? And I was absolutely amazed to find out that one of them had run 10 miles the day before and still turned up for training the following day. That blew my mind. I didn't think the body would cope with that.
Okay.
Which is, so it started to get me sort of thinking about running a bit more seriously. But ultimately, what really changed things was in my mid-30s, 35, 36 years of age, where I felt that my running may start to go downhill because of age, getting a bit older and a bit slower. So I made inquiries to try and get some advice from a coach, and I was put in touch with my now coach, Ian Wilson, who turned out to be I think he's the ex-England cross-country coach.
Okay.
And we met for coffee. We had a chat, and he then outlined what training I should be doing, and that's where it really took off. I listened to him. I had a lot of time for that guy, and he ultimately changed the way I train and the way I go about sort of preparing for races, and that's when it really started to get some really quick times.
So then your distance, I know you as a 10K runner. What made you focus just on 10K? So like you're at Woodturn, obviously I know I spent some time at Woodturn. They have 7 groups, and like number 1 group is like the elite of the club, and then you've got the 7, which is the beginners. I can picture you always being in the number 1 group. When did it go to like, okay, now I'm going to focus on a distance and make that my distance?
Well, it's quite funny actually, because the very first time I turned up to Woodturn, and they obviously asked sort of what my running background was. I think I probably played it down a little bit because I spent the first 2 sessions in Group 7, and I was too polite
Please
to
tell
say.
me you're joking. You was in the beginners group.
Only because I just said I didn't do a lot of running, and I think they were playing it safe to make sure I wasn't out of my depths, and I didn't. As I said, I was a bit too polite to say that my 10K time was sort of 34, 35 minutes at the time. But anyway, in terms of answering the question, in terms of 10K, it just seemed a natural distance. I think there was a lot of races at 10K. The cross-country race was a sort of 5 miles, 6 miles that I'd been used to running. And so it seemed to be the natural sort of distance to fit into. And as I said, there were a lot of 10K races available for me to do. And I think they were much more popular than half marathon. And certainly at that stage, the idea of running 13 miles was out of the question. I mean, I just wasn't used to running anywhere near that. I'd never run 10 miles in my life when I first started running 10K races. So, yeah, the thought of running any further than 10K was not appealing. So,
So then how did this lead to the Masters?
well, again, it was Ian that really put me onto this. In our very first meeting, we met for coffee, and it was a chance to sort of get to know each other and to see whether we could work together. And I remember he asked me what sort of ambitions I had at 35 years of age as to where I wanted to go with my running. And I kind of said something along the lines of, I just want to maintain kind of form. I don't want to get slower. And it'd be nice to win the odd race here and there. And I remember him replying with something along the lines of, well, if you're not going to be more ambitious than that, then I'm not interested. Because I think he could see that there was a bit more talent there than I was making use of. And so, yeah, as I say, he kind of just changed my perspective on running, and we started to work together, and that's when the times really started to get a lot better, and start to enjoy running and competing and racing, and it kind of led on to this idea of running at the masters level, because I have no idea there's this whole world of masters athletics out there, which certainly beyond county level starts at 35 years of age for men. And he just said, you need to get involved, and with a bit of training, you could be right up there with the best masters athletes. And I think it took me about 2 years to start really getting to the level where I was knocking on the door of sort of the British masters athletics teams. And yeah, certainly by the age of 37, 38, I was in that kind of the mix of people being selected for the national side.
So then what happened, your very first Masters race, what was that experience like?
Well, I remember taking myself off to France. I competed in the European Masters Championships, but you don't have to be selected for that as such. As long as you've done the qualifying time, you can just enter yourself and run for Great Britain. So I did that in France, and I think I didn't have a particularly good race. I remember it being very hot. I think I came about 18th or 19th, which is good, but in terms of time on paper, I don't think that's sort of particularly well. But that was quite an early memory of being involved in masters athletics. But then I started to compete in a lot more of the masters championships because, you know, although they're held within, very often they're held within open races. You can enter the British Masters event if you like, and then obviously they work out the placings afterwards. And my first sort of British competition, I think, was a cross country, and I sort of hadn't realised that I'd won my age group because I was actually beaten by people in the age group above me. So although I won the British title for 35-year-olds, I think there was a couple of 40-year-olds that were better. But that started to get me a sort of onto the rung of being involved in the British athletics scene and kind of travelling around the country competing in the British Masters events.
And then obviously you didn't just stay at 10K. Was you 10K for a couple of years and then you went on to further distance? Because we both know you did take that big step. But where did you go from 10K? Did you go to a 10 miler or did you jump to a half marathon? Or
from memory, they were kind of all sort of mixed in. Because as I got fitter and my training developed, and I started to run further miles in training, then I became a lot more confident at the sort of the half marathon distance. But being very fit for half marathon actually enables you to run much quicker for 10K, and in turn, it probably has a bearing on how quick you can run a 5K. So my range of distances started to grow a little bit more, and I seemed to be, while I was very quick at 10K, it seemed to have a knock-on effect for half marathon and 5K as well. But with regards to the marathon, I first got involved in the idea of running a marathon while I was at Woodturning, and I remember there was a guy called Jeff Mason. I don't know if he listens to these podcasts, but he's a good friend of mine. Sort of suggested that I should do one, and I got involved in a bit more training. My first marathon was the Edinburgh Marathon, but it wasn't my focus event, so I was still at that stage really focused on the sort of the 10K, 5K, and half marathon distances, which I was getting better at all the time. And then the marathon kind of developed a little bit later on, and then you know, I kind of started to get a bit better at that. But I wouldn't say marathon's my strongest distance.
well, we beg to differ on that, and we'll explain why later on. So, how many marathons have you done now?
I think it's 7. So I haven't done that many, but when I have trained for them, it's been a long process in terms of preparing myself for those. So, and I think the marathon's such a unique distance because things can go wrong in a marathon much more than they can in any other distance lower than that. So if you have a bad day at 10K, it's not your time's not that different to what you could normally expect to achieve. But marathon is the wheels can fall off very suddenly, and that kind of makes it more exciting.
So give people an idea of your times. So 5K, you're known at Northampton Park Run as being as someone always in the top 2. What's your fastest park run?
I ran. I was in my 40s when I ran 15 minutes 33 for the park run at Northampton. And last year I ran 15:40 at North Aller Fields down in London. So yeah, at my best I've been sort of around that 15:30, 15:35 mark. But I ran a 15. Go on, sorry.
That's all good, Carol.
I definitely surprised myself last year. I took part in the Beat the Sunset 5K over near Kettering area. Really, you know, good field of strong county level athletes. And I think the guy that won it was a junior international triathlete. I've never raced against him before, but the top 10 was certainly going to be a challenge. But I ran 15:22 last year, so as a 45-year-old athlete. 15:22, which was a surprise, but I was in very good form following marathon training and half marathon training. And that was actually my PB, so 15:22 last year.
And what's your, would you say with age, I'll go on to your other times in a minute, but would you say from age, especially, you know, you've started from school, you've gone all the way, do you feel you've got stronger or do you feel you've maintained? Because let's be honest, 15 minutes for 5K, you know, you must have had more than porridge in the morning. Yeah.
I think what's been interesting is having met my coach, I worked out a formula that works for me. It seems to, the type of training that I do, my body seems to respond to it. So it wouldn't, it might not necessarily be the best training for everybody, but I'm always willing to sort of learn and sort of tweak my training. So I think what's been interesting is, as I'm thinking I'm getting slower as I'm getting older, I've become a lot smarter in the way I approach training. I've probably tried to find other ways of becoming quicker. So things like just keeping an eye on the diet, the way I recover, getting plenty of rest, knowing my body a lot more. And so over the last sort of certainly 5 or 6 years, there's been this kind of gradual tweaking of things in training that just seem to have worked. And as a result, I have got quicker and quicker, which is great. I don't feel like I'm 45, 46 years of age. I keep well and I train hard, and I think it's that constant willingness to learn all the time that's made me quicker. But I'm not slowing down yet.
No, and let's go through the other times. So 10K, what's your fastest? Now, let's say ever, and then now, what average?
Okay.
Up to last year.
So I won the British Masters title at 10K in my early 40s, and I ran 31 minutes 17, which is an average of 5 minutes and 2 seconds per mile.
I just did a 5K in that today, just putting it out there. So, okay.
So that was a great race, actually. I think of all my races at British Masters and the British Masters titles that I've won, that was the day when everybody was there in the same race, and to beat them on that day, that was a really special day, and to run such a good time as well. So 31:17 for 10K, but I won the Silverstone 10K last year. Great race against Dom Jones. It was really, really, really quick last mile, but that was just outside 32 minutes. But I'm a bit suspicious the course may have been slightly long, but the official time I think was 32 minutes 10. That was last year. Half marathon I've run 70 minutes at Peterborough, but last year again, so just the times, I won the Northampton half marathon in just outside 71 minutes. And that's quite a hilly course, because you've got to go up the big steep climb in I can't remember, near Woodturning.
Around Brackmills, the mile 7, we called the beast. Yes. Yeah,
so to run 71 minutes on that course, and to not really have, no disrespect to the other runners, because I think one or two were preparing for marathons and other things, but I was out on my own right from the first mile, so it became a bit of a time trial. So to run effectively on my own for the entire race and run just outside 71 minutes on that course, I really knew I was in good shape that day. And then marathon 10K, I ran 52 minutes 24, which I think was the second quickest time in Great Britain age-wise for that year. And marathon, the Edinburgh Marathon was my quickest marathon, again in my 40s. I ran 2 hours and 30 and a few seconds, which I'm really annoyed about, because under 2 hours.
Every second counts.
Absolutely. But as a comparison, last year, so again in the same year, I ran the PB for the 5K. I ran 2 hours 32 and a bit again, 2 hours 32 and a bit at the Milton Keynes. So I won the Milton Keynes Marathon last year.
And was that a big lead, the Milton Keynes Marathon, or was you chased?
No, not at all. I was in second place by quite a long way with about 5 or 6 miles to go. The guy ahead of me looked so strong, and he had a comfortable lead. I think about a minute and a half at one point. But then the lead, one of the lead bikes kept dropping back and was saying that the gap was closing, and I caught him at about the 22, 23 mile mark, I think, and ended up beating him by about 4 minutes. So I think he was really, really struggling. But I had a chat with him after the race, actually. So I only took the lead in the last few miles. And it turns out he was a Polish international with a PB of 2 hours 17.
Wow.
And he'd run 2 weeks earlier in another marathon in the UK in 2:25. but was so disappointed with that time, unbelievably, that he looked at the record for Milton Keynes, which I think the course record is 2:31.5, and felt that he could easily achieve that and get decent prize money for the course record and the win. And he just said he was too tired. I mean, to run a 2:25 marathon and expect to run a 2:31 within 2 weeks is some going. But he just fell apart in the last few miles. So I caught him on the right day.
So obviously 2019 was a great year for you, but also that it wasn't for other reasons. Are you willing to share why you have been so quiet since it would be Northampton half, wouldn't it? That would have been your last race.
Northampton half was my last competitive race.
In September, the end of September in 2019. So why haven't we seen you at Northampton Park Run other than COVID and other races? Why did you went out on a high, so to speak, at the moment?
Basically, I'm currently under observation and sort of investigation for a very abnormal heart rhythm, which has stopped me from competing at the moment, and there is a very strong possibility that I may have that. I might.
Hang on, Michael. It just cut out. I don't know if it's your iPad or whatever. You just went, there's a strong possibility, and then you froze.
I'm not sure it's the internet connection here. So, basically, what it is that I'm currently under investigation and observation from 2 different cardiac units for a very unusual heart rhythm, which is posing a few questions to the experts. And the way this came about was, I'm just trying to think of the dates here. So just before my very good year last year. So we're looking at January 2019, where I was kind of in marathon training. But unfortunately, my father passed away in January 2019, and there's been a long period of quite heavy stress and anxiety and worry. And I was just at work, and I remember being at work and just feeling a bit odd, a bit unusual, like an anxiety feeling, and almost like wanting to catch my breath a little bit. And I put it down to obviously the stress and the worry of my dad. And I thought, well, the sensible thing to do is just have a quick checkup with the doctors, and we'll get it out of the way and we'll clear it up. And by the time I'd gone to see the doctors, which normally a few days later, I felt absolutely fine. And I distinctively remember waiting for the nurse to come and chat to me, and feeling as like I was wasting their time, and I felt fine, and I've never had these problems before. And interestingly, haven't happened since, actually. But they decided to do a resting ECG amongst other things, and blood pressure was fine, weight's fine, etc. But they came back after about 15 minutes with a doctor and the nurse with a very worrying look on their face, and saying your resting heart rate's just really abnormal, and we're very worried about it. So stop doing what you're doing, stop running. We need to get this investigated. And obviously, I was trying to explain to them that I'm a very fit, healthy runner, and do a lot of miles in training. But they said, no, we need to have a look at this. And I even at the time, I remember thinking, this is just because I'm a fit athlete, and you do hear stories about athletes having slightly odd heart rhythms. But anyway, I was then posted off to Northampton Hospital, had lots of checks, and they put me on a treadmill. And even then they said, oh, well, your heart rate goes back to normality after running, so you're actually better off running than you are at rest, which is weird. But they didn't seem overly concerned, but suggested that I should have further investigations done, which ended up with me going to Oxford, and a team of about 10 cardiologists all discussing my situation, and they came to the conclusion that there is a potential risk for cardiac myopathy, early heart disease, that I should be genetically tested. There was a strange condition that they said I might have that could actually really impact on my health, and that I shouldn't run, and that the best advice would be to detrain. to see whether my heart rate goes or heart rhythm goes back to normal, which obviously is not what you want to hear as an
No.
athlete. It was obviously at this stage now I was beginning to worry, but oddly that diagnosis came in November, and I'd been doing all these races with no symptoms, no feelings of problems with the heart at all. So I'd spent an entire season running all these quick times for their diagnosis then to be, we're worried, you should retrain. But obviously you have to listen to the experts. So that's what I did. But they also suggested that I might be able to get a second opinion from a doctor, a cardiologist in London who deals with professional footballers and real top class world level athletes. And I had the privilege of speaking to the cardiologist over the phone. And he said, well, there's definitely something not quite right with your resting heart rhythm. However, I don't think the advice should be that you should completely stop altogether. So I'm now in a bit of a limbo. Okay to carry on training at a light level, but until further analysis is done, then I can't push myself to the limits like I have been doing until they know a little bit more about what's going on with the heart rhythm. So I've actually had a consultation this morning on the way down. I'm now in Newquay. On the way down in the car, I spoke to another consultant in Oxford who has given me the good news that my genetic testing is clear.
Yay!
Which is good news, but it's slightly odd because what in this kind of field of genetic kind of research, it's all quite new. So while I don't have one of the common gene problems that would be linked to this kind of early heart rhythm problems and heart disease, they can't be sure that I don't have one of the other ones they don't know about yet.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of she's quite honest about it, and she said, look, you do watch marathons on TV, and you do occasionally see people who just collapse while running, and she didn't mince her words about it. So she said we need to be sure, and we're not ready to clear you from our own investigations just yet. So it's a case of I can run, I can train, but I can't push myself. And so that's where I'm in this little bit of a period at the moment where I may well be having to come to a decision about not competing again, which is hard to take, but I've also had a great 10 or 11 years of competing at a good level. So that's where we're at the moment. I've got another consultation in January 2021 now, isn't it? So where they might be able to tell me something new. But yeah, that's kind of how things are at the moment.
Whoa! But Michael, don't. This is the first time that, like, I know for myself that you hear something that's, especially with a runner like you at your level, that in some ways, thankfully, you went and got tested, and this happened before you did a race, and then something happened really serious. As we know, it has happened at Milton Keynes, where a guy, just suddenly collapsed, and in this case, you got seen when you started getting the signs early on. So,
absolutely, and I'm not sort of looking at this from a point of view of a really negative point of view, because I think I'd rather know than not know. Yes. First of all, and it's very rare. So I appreciate that a lot of people may be listening to this or seeing it and maybe have some concerns. But actually, this is very, very rare, and I think it just may be that I've either been lucky that nothing's happened so far, but it's better for me to know about it rather than to sort of be in the dark about it. So it's incredibly rare for athletes to have this. Yeah, I've enjoyed all the competing that I've done, and it will be hard to think about not competing again, but it's not a closed door just yet.
So have you thought of looking at other sports? And have you been doing other sports? Obviously running is quite heavy. Maybe yoga, Pilates, a bit of stretching, On a serious note, you're someone that's kept fit from 11 years of age, really, and before that, because you'd be running around playgrounds and whatever, to now suddenly be told this. You can't obviously stop because you're trained to keep going.
I think the fact that they've told me that I can train is good news in the sense that I would probably maintain some degree of fitness, and I won't be at sort of that peak level that I've been used to. But it does change my view on whether or not I would enter races from a completely different perspective now. It's interesting listening to some of your other podcasts about what motivates people to run, and obviously a lot of people do it for a social element, which is great. A lot of people do it to see how far they can push themselves. But for me, it's always been, how quick can I be? PBs has always been, I've always been looking at ways of getting better all the time. So I think the idea of not being able to do that just changes the way I would look at running. I think I'd still probably run for fitness purposes, but I'm not sure I would be wanting to enter a races knowing that I can't compete where I have been.
Well, at Northampton Park Run, when it starts up, I'm going to get you as tail walker. No excuses.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. And I think, I've sort of started to think about things differently, and whether or not I'd be able to, pace people for races and that sort of thing, which would be something that would be sort of giving back a little bit. So rather than just focusing on myself, it'd be a nice way of helping other people to sort of achieve their goals or whatever distance they want to. So.
What about coaching? You said about pacing, what about proper coaching? Because you've got all this experience, which got you personally to actually win races. So obviously there's something that you've been taught in the past, all the knowledge you've built, that you could share onto other people. I know you say it doesn't work with everyone, but some of what you've learned might help someone.
Yeah,
Have you thought about sharing that?
Well, I do give out a lot of advice, not in a sort of a formal capacity as a coach, I suppose, but if anybody asks about any element of training, or they want to ask about how fast they should be running in training, then I've always been willing to help people with that. So I think the idea of coaching does appeal. And I think, as I said, I do have a lot of knowledge based on the last, the years that I've been competing, in terms of training methodologies and what works best and that sort of thing. And I do kind of, in a kind of roundabout way, I do coach a few people, and I know that you've spoken to Peter Currington on these podcasts before, and we've worked quite well together over the last few years, and I've certainly helped him out with his running. So I'm more than happy to sort of go down that line and consider that as a kind of a way of staying involved with athletics and passing on a lot of the information. But it's not something I considered while I was competing. I think it was important to focus on what I was doing myself, rather than just detracting away from what I was doing in racing. But now that I know probably not going to be racing, I think it's probably a good way forward for me to sort of keep interested.
Yeah, definitely, because on a previous podcast you would have heard Chris Lamb, who's aiming for the Masters 800. He's a local lad that could definitely do with your help. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Stick together.
Well, I think Chris looks after himself really, really well. I mean, I admire everything Chris does, and the fact that he does all these different races, and he's got a huge range of ability. And what he's done with Partners Jog and Run is just incredible. So I'm always willing to help people out and maybe think about training differently. And I think he could do really well at Masters Athletics, and he's still got that sort of raw speed that you need for the shorter distances.
So what, obviously, you're at the moment, you've just taken in everything that's happened with, health wise and whatever. What would you like going forward to happen?
In terms of running?
Race.
So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned about coaching, and I've been involved quite a lot with sort of the younger age group of Rugby Northampton on the track. So, it's really nice to get the youngsters involved. I know that Woodturning don't have a track team as such. They're predominantly road running and cross country and triathlon now. So, yeah, in terms of the youngsters, it's really good to sort of encourage them, and they have a lot of junior athletes there that would be nice to be able to help out and pass on, sort of my experiences, I suppose. But then also to sort of give back to Woodturning, I think I'd like to get a lot more involved with them, because they've given me a lot in terms of supporting me as an athlete throughout the last few years, which is great. And they're really just a really good sociable bunch as well. So it'd be nice to sort of go down
Give
the coaching
back.
line. Absolutely. And in terms of where I am with my own training, I think until I definitively get told that it would be unsafe to compete, then I would still have it in mind that I might still want to. I still believe I can get quicker at marathon. I think it's a distance that you learn to become better at with the body develops a little bit.
I hope your consultant never listens to this.
Well, we'll see. But I think with a marathon, your heart's not quite as high as if you're running a 5K. It just lasts for longer. So maybe I'll just have to run marathons rather than 5Ks. But I haven't sort of lost that kind of hope that I can still compete. And so I think from this point onwards, I mean, even at the moment, I'm training 5 days a week, and for the last few weeks, I've been running about 40 miles a week in training quite happily. And I feel pretty fit. I'm quite happy running what feels quite an easy pace. It's still quite quick, so I haven't really lost too much fitness. So I'm hoping to hang on to that until, as I said, I get told once and for all that competing is no longer an option.
So any listener out there listening to us, they're most probably thinking, God, does this guy ever consume anything bad in his body? I know you do like a pint, so let's put it out there. What is your treat after these races? A beer.
Do you know what? I dream about beer before I compete. It's weird because I tend not, when I'm in the kind of the real mix of hard training, it's not that I'm not worried about the calories because I'm very lean and I tend to burn most of it off. But I just can't recover in time. So if I start having too much to drink, then I don't sleep well, and it means I can't train the next day, and I feel a bit horrible, really. But I do like a beer after a race, I have to say. But I eat pretty well. I eat healthily. I eat fresh every day. I don't eat any takeaways, that sort of thing. But I do like beer and I do like wine. So it's just everything in moderation, really. But dark chocolate is a weakness for me. I love dark chocolate.
So you're like what I class as a naked runner in the sense that you don't carry anything, do you? Because you're too damn quick to even like consume anything as you're running along. Or is that me not seeing the gels tucked in a pocket? Or
well, from a physiological point of view, anything at sort of the pace I'm running, anything beyond about an hour and a half, then you've really got to start thinking about taking on board some fuel during a race. So obviously with a half marathon time of sort of 71 minutes, 72 minutes, it's not really necessary as long as I'm eating well leading up to the race and on the morning of a race, then I don't need to worry about it too much. But for the marathon, certainly that's a whole different science. And if I didn't take gels during the race, then I'd be really struggling in the last few miles. And I found out the hard way, actually. My very first marathon, I didn't really do the research. To be honest, I probably didn't train like a proper marathon runner should train. I was kind of getting by on a few long runs, but the whole kind of pattern of training was very different to the way I'd approach a marathon now. And I remember it's the Abingdon Marathon, and my first ever marathon. I was very, new to the event, and I didn't take any gels during the race. And I remember getting to about 16, 17 miles, and I was with the leader, and we were bouncing along quite happily at about 2 hours 34, 35. And I felt fine. I felt so relaxed. Got to 20 miles, I'm thinking, feel great. 22 miles, and this is where people had warned me about. I remember some of my own teammates watching the race, not competing, were trying to hand me out gels and stuff, and I'm fine, whatever, just water's fine. Yeah, well, I got to about 22 and a half miles, and within the space of, it happened so quickly, in the space of no more than about half a mile, I went from feeling fine to pretty much blacking out.
Yeah.
And it was so quick. And I remember starting to have tunnel vision and seeing in black and white. And I almost passed out while running, which is really odd.
Yeah.
And I just had to stop. So I basically stopped at about 24th mile, and I walked a bit, but I was, as you can probably sometimes see runners on the screen, kind of zigzagging up the road a little bit. I was pretty much like that until I was kind of getting some jelly babies inside me from someone standing by the side of the road. It was an official feed station, so I trusted what they were giving me was all right. And it just about gave me enough energy. But the marathon finishes, and you come onto the corner of an athletics track, and it's 3/4 of a lap by the time you join the track, and it's literally 3/4 of the track to get to the finish line. I stopped 4 times on that 3/4 of a lap. I could not carry. And having crossed the line, I then blacked out, and I ended up waking up in St John's Ambulance. So I went from 2 hours 35 to 2 hours 40. So I lost 5 minutes in the last about 2.5 miles, which was a very rapid decline in pace, as you can imagine. But it never happened again.
Why did you carry jelly babies?
I learned to fuel properly. So I think my second marathon was Leicester, and I came second at Leicester with a much quicker time. And I learned how to become better at running the marathon, I think. And it just shows you that, fueling is incredibly important for that type of distance. So.
Wow. So what advice would you give to people that are thinking of starting to run or increase their level? What valuable lesson have you learned that you could pass on to us?
I think first and foremost, it's a bit of a cliche, but enjoy what you're doing. And the reason why I say that very specifically is round about the time I started to get really involved in running, I didn't necessarily enjoy racing, which sounds odd. And I'd get very uptight and wound up and stressed. And I remember when I started dating my now wife, Lou, she asked me a very simple question as to why do you do it? Why do you put yourself through this and not enjoy it? And it changed the way I looked at running. So I started to enjoy running a lot more. And I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I got a lot quicker because I was enjoying running and I enjoyed training and I look forward to racing. So I think probably first and foremost is enjoy what you're doing and never see running as a chore. So the second bit of advice is whatever level you're at, is just develop your training gradually. Obviously, there's lots of different components to a training program: frequency, intensity, duration. And if you picture that triangle of training, so frequency, intensity, and duration, is as you're developing a training program that suits you, is never change more than one of those components at a time. So if you run 3 days a week, you either increase the number of days you run a week, but don't run faster or necessarily longer. So 4 runs of a shorter distance is as good as 3 runs at a longer distance. But once you've established your distance, keep the distance the same, then possibly increase your intensity, but never change more than one of those factors. Otherwise, you're prone to injury. That's certainly good advice. And I remember with my own training, as I always look at the long-term plan, I'm very good at preparing from a long way out for races, so that it allows me to build my training very, very, very gradually. And that, I think, has helped me avoid injury, and it's also allowed me to run for a longer period of time at a good level. So that'd be a good advice.
No, thanks for that. I'll end the podcast on that, but so I'll go there, and this bit will be the bonus bit. But I was going to say, like, how long did it take you to find the best trainers that suited you?
The best trainers
for you, because everyone's different. We've all got different feet.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit hit and miss, and once I found a trainer that worked, I just stuck with that. And I trust the fact that they are the best trainers. So I train all my long runs in ASICS. I think it's the 2000 range, because it gives medial support. My foot tends to collapse in a little bit when I'm running. So just having that extra support seems to keep the injuries at bay a lot more. As for my race shoe, I've gone through lots of different race shoes, but then I started racing a lot in Brooks. Brooks had a race ST shoe, I think it's called. and that seemed to just fit with me really, really well. And the only thing that's taken me away from racing in Brooks shoes now is the new Nike shoe, which is unbelievable. And that's the one that I favour now. And I think it's just within the realms of what's allowed nowadays, but it's an impressive shoe to race in.
Is that the shoe that Elliot Kilptrong did under 2 hours? I can never pronounce his surname, but
he's got the slightly newer version. I think he's got the next one up from the one I've raced in. But it's the same concept of the kind of the carbon plate shoe, which caused quite a lot of controversy. And I think a lot of people have had this sort of argument that it's the shoe doing the work now. But I think, my view is if it's available and it's legal and other people are racing in it, then that kind of fits. But if it's potentially a legal shoe, I wouldn't go anywhere near it.
So what did you think about the marathon being broken under 2 hours?
From a scientific perspective, I was very impressed with it all, but obviously it's not really a race as such. So I did have mixed feelings as to how I felt watching it. But
Did you watch it?
I did, yeah. I found it very intriguing, and I think records are there to be definitely, obviously, a bit of a cliche again, but records are there to be broken. But it's done in quite an artificial way, obviously with pacers and lead car and perfect conditions and the right track. So as I said, from a science perspective, it was quite interesting to watch, and I quite enjoyed it from that perspective. And I think now that it's been broken, like with a lot of other records, that people now believe it can be done. So I think it's only a matter of time that it will happen in a race.
What do you think about women racers? Because I do strongly believe there will be a time where women will get very close to men. If you watch how the elite women are coming up, what's your views on that?
To a certain degree, I'd agree with that. I think if you look at the world records, particularly in distance events, then the women are closing the gap relatively on the men very quickly. But also I think there'll be a point where it starts to flatten out. And it will come down to sort of the physiology of the male versus the female athlete. I don't know the exact figures, and I'm not sort of an expert physiologist, but from my understanding, obviously men have an advantage in terms of muscle strength, heart size, lung size, all the key factors in endurance running. But it's interesting that I think I remember reading somewhere that in ultra distance events where you're relying on the natural fat reserves on the body, that women are incredibly good at just keeping going. And in terms of those events, then the further the distance, the more the women will be closing the gap on the men, which is quite interesting. It's quite nice to sort of watch that develop. Hoping that it won't be too long before the gap's really closed.
Yes, because Paula Radcliffe's marathon now, that's been broken, and I just reckon in the next few years we're going to see it broken again.
Yeah, I mean it's I think we're particularly at elite level running, we're in a really strange time with a lot of controversy over shoes and also assistance, if you like, and you hope and pray that when you watch people achieve these incredible performances that it is natural as well.
Yeah, because I think, is it Wilson at the moment, one of the Africans? He's just got a 4-year ban.
That's right, and I think, as I say, we're going through a period at the moment where it's a really sad case of when you see an incredible performance, the first thing is you doubt whether it's clean or not, and that's not good for the sport at all. And I think that kind of also comes down to even the level that we run at locally. Unfortunately, people will seek to gain an advantage at all levels, really. I'd be absolutely amazed if I haven't competed against people that have considered that as an option of way of improving their performance, which is very, very sad, really. But as I said, the athlete that you just mentioned, I think, was the only person to have beaten Kipchoge in a marathon in the last few years. And now to get a ban, and it's really muddying the sport a lot. So I really hope that at the top level it gets cleaned out really thoroughly. But it's going to take some quite big changes to achieve that. However, there are still amazing performance being achieved by people who are clean, and you hope that sort of sets, doesn't put people off the sport in any way. And you know that there's a lot of people out there who train incredibly hard to achieve what they achieve. So yeah, it's nice to watch and believe that they are clean when they do it. So.
Yeah. Are you like me? Do you love watching elite athletes on the telly?
Absolutely. I'm glued to most athletics events, but when you hear more and more people being caught, then it does put a bit of a shadow over the sport a little bit. But I do love watching sport, and I grew up watching, particularly having gone to school with a guy that became an Olympic athlete. That's how I've grown up. I've watched the London Marathon almost every year, glued to it, and I love the way the race develops at that sort of distance as well, because there's a lot of tactics involved. But absolutely, I've loved watching athletics from a very young age. And actually, interestingly, when I did my very first national schools cross country, where I came about 106th in the race, it was the same. No, I did. I told you I was a rugby player running athletics, doing it part time, but I'm the same age as Paula Radcliffe. So she was actually there at the very first schools event I competed in. And I remember watching her win the female race of the same age as I was competing
Wow.
in. And she won it so comfortably. And you started to sort of think, God, this is a class athlete. She's going to go a long way. So to sort of see that at the age of, I was probably 16, 17, 18 years of age, to then watch her develop and become a world-class athlete was it's exciting to watch that development.
Wow. Well, Michael, I'm going to let you get back to your weekends, because your friends and your wife have been amazing letting us have your time, and you must need that drink. Beer.
They're laughing in the background. I think they've had too many already. So
yeah. Thank you guys for letting me borrow Michael for the podcast. So now have a good one. Thanks for doing this, Michael, and we'll catch up.
You're more than welcome. Cheers, Michelle.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.